K-Tel had seen many things in his long service as an ambassador, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The shuttle's doors slid open with a quiet hiss, and he stepped into the human dwelling, expecting something familiar, perhaps a sterile diplomatic chamber or a carefully controlled environment, like those of most civilized species. Instead, he was met with something that sent a shiver through his carapace. Right in the center of the human home, stretching toward the ceiling with thick, twisting branches, was a death world tree. Its dark, gnarled bark looked almost like hardened stone, its thick roots breaking through the floor as if refusing to be contained. Large, red-veined leaves rustled despite the lack of wind, and for a brief moment, K-Tal swore he saw the bark itself shift, as if the tree was alive in ways he couldn't comprehend. He felt his secondary hearts thump against his ribcage, his instincts screaming at him to back away. This was madness. Absolute madness. How could they live with such a thing inside their homes? The humans greeted him with their usual smiles, their strange forwardness that always made his species uneasy. Captain Sarah Briggs, the woman who had invited him here for diplomatic discussions, gestured toward the massive tree with an amused expression. "Something wrong, Ambassador?" she asked casually, as if there wasn't a monster lurking right in the middle of her home. K-Tel struggled to find his voice, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. That is a Taroxian strangler, is it not?" His voice came out more panicked than he intended, and his clawed fingers twitched as he took a cautious step back. "That species has wiped out entire ecosystems. It is one of the most aggressive plant life forms ever recorded. Why in the name of the stars would you keep it inside your home?" His translator automatically adjusted the frantic pitch in his voice, but even without it, Sarah only chuckled, folding her arms across her chest as if she found his reaction amusing. "Yeah, that's what the rest of the galaxy says. But we've had this one for years. Raised it since it was a sapling. It's perfectly safe." She stepped forward, placing a bare hand on the dark bark of the tree. K-Tal's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. Was she insane? Did she have no sense of self-preservation? The Taroxian strangler was known for its highly reactive nature, its ability to sense fear and weakness in living creatures. The moment an untrained hand touched it, the bark would split open, revealing razor-sharp vines that would wrap around the victim in seconds, draining them dry before they could even scream. And yet, Sarah stood there, completely unharmed, her fingers running along the bark as if petting a domesticated creature. "See?" she said, turning back to him with a smirk. "Not dangerous at all." K-Tel felt his mind spin. He had spent years studying human adaptability, their terrifying resilience that allowed them to thrive in conditions no other species could tolerate. But this was something different. This was not mere survival. This was control. He had always thought humans were reckless beings, charging headfirst into dangerous environments with their primitive instincts. But now, staring at this death world tree, watching it remain completely docile under their touch, he realized something far more unsettling. Humans did not just survive on dangerous worlds. They tamed them. They bent the most fearsome parts of nature to their will. And that, more than anything, sent a deep, primal unease through him. His mandibles clicked as he forced himself to step closer, every nerve in his body screaming in protest. "It does not attack you," he said, though the words sounded ridiculous, even as he spoke them. Sarah grinned. "Of course not. It recognizes me. It knows I'm part of its ecosystem. Humans, and this tree, we've got an understanding." She patted the bark again before stepping back. "That's what makes us different, Ambassador. The rest of the galaxy sees danger and runs. We see it and think, how can we live with it?" K-Tel could not decide if this was wisdom or madness, but as he stared at the tree, this monstrous force of nature that had ended countless lives now standing docile in a human home, he realized something chilling. The galaxy had always feared humans for their weapons, their warships, their ruthless efficiency in battle. But those things could be measured. This was something else entirely. For the first time in his career, K-Tel felt something he never thought he would experience toward the human species. Not just respect. Not just fear. but a deep, unsettling realization. Humanity was not just another species in the stars. They were something entirely different. And the galaxy had yet to understand just how dangerous that truly was. K-Tal could not tear his gaze away from the monstrous tree standing in the center of the human dwelling. The way its roots had cracked through the floor, the eerie rustling of its dark-veined leaves despite the absence of wind, the almost imperceptible pulse beneath its bark, everything about it radiated danger. And yet, the humans lived with it, treated it as though it were no more than a simple decoration. The thought made his mandibles twitch in disbelief. He had spent years studying humanity, their strange customs, their reckless bravado, their seemingly endless ability to survive in environments that would reduce most species to dust. But this was beyond his understanding. The Tyroxian strangler was not a plant. It was a predator, a force of nature that consumed anything that came too close. And these humans had invited it into their home. Sarah Briggs stood beside the monstrous tree, casually leaning against its bark as if it were nothing more than a common fixture. The way she smiled, completely unafraid, made something cold settle in K-Tal's stomach. "You really don't get it, do you?" she said, tilting her head slightly, her expression more amused than concerned. "You think this thing is just waiting to snap me in half, don't you?" K-Tal's inner eyelids flickered as he took a slow step forward, his body tense, every instinct urging him to retreat. "I do not think, Captain," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "I know what this species is capable of. The Tyroxian strangler has wiped out entire colonies. Your people have classified it as a level 5 planetary threat. And yet you have one inside your home." He exhaled sharply, forcing himself to remain calm. "This is not rational behavior." Sarah chuckled, shaking her head. "Rational by whose standards? Yours?" She pushed herself off the tree and took a step toward him. "See, that's the thing. You Exilari and most of the other species in the galaxy, you look at things in terms of danger and safety. If something is dangerous, you avoid it. You run. You classify it as uncontrollable and move on." She gestured toward the massive tree, her movements relaxed, almost lazy. "But that's not how humans work. We don't run from danger. We understand it. We learn how to live with it." She smiled, placing a hand on the bark again, and K-Tal swore he saw the surface of the tree shift ever so slightly under her touch, as if responding. He stiffened. That should not be possible. This species did not bond with anything. It was a ruthless killer. It should not recognize her as anything but prey. And yet, here it stood, completely still, as if accepting her presence. A slow, uneasy realization began to form in K-Tal's mind, one that sent a deep chill through him. "How?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "How is this possible?" Sarah gave him a grin. "Because humans don't just adapt to environments. Environments adapt to us." She let her fingers slide over the bark before stepping back, leaving K-Tal standing there, staring at the impossible. "You see a monster, Ambassador. I see a partner. This tree and I, we've reached an understanding." K-Tal's throat felt dry. "You speak as if it is intelligent," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "This species has no neural structure, no cognitive function beyond basic predatory instincts." He exhaled, his mind racing to make sense of what he was seeing. "It should not be capable of recognizing you as anything other than a potential meal." Sarah shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe intelligence isn't the only way a life form learns. Maybe survival is its own kind of intelligence. Maybe, over time, things that should kill each other learn that they don't have to." She turned to him fully now, her expression serious. "We don't just conquer worlds, Ambassador. We become part of them. We don't just force nature to bend, we learn how to live with it." She folded her arms, her gaze locked onto his. "And that's why humanity is different. That's why we survive where others fail. Because we don't just avoid danger. We make it ours." K-Tal felt something cold settle in his chest. He had always thought of humans as resilient, perhaps even reckless in their fearlessness. But this was something else. This was not recklessness. This was control. This was an ability no other species in the galaxy possessed. His mandibles clicked together slowly as a single, terrifying thought took root in his mind. The galaxy had always seen humans as survivors, as warriors, as beings who could endure hardships no other species could. But this was something far more dangerous. They did not just endure their environments. They became part of them. They did not just survive death worlds. They made them home. K-Tail took a step back, his heart pounding in his chest. He had come here today expecting to learn about human diplomacy, to engage in trade discussions, to build alliances. But now, he realized, he had learned something far more important. Something the rest of the galaxy had failed to see. Humans did not fear the universe. The universe feared them. Ambassador K-Tail had never felt fear like this before. He had stood before warlords, faced the cold calculations of bureaucratic overlords, and even survived tense negotiations with species that considered his kind food. But none of that compared to what he was facing now. He stood in the center of the human warship, a place where steel and fire merged into a machine of destruction, where the air itself felt charged with the echoes of 1,000 battles. And yet, it was not the ship that terrified him. It was the challenge the humans had placed before him. Sarah Briggs, the ever-smirking human captain, stood beside him, arms crossed as she observed his reaction. "It's simple, Ambassador," she said, her voice almost amused. "You just have to walk through the corridor. Nothing more." She gestured towards the dimly lit passageway ahead, and K-Tail's secondary hearts hammered against his ribs. The corridor was lined with strange, pulsing lights. The walls seemed to shift, as if they were alive, breathing in sync with some unseen force. Something was waiting inside. He could feel it. His kind had instincts honed over millennia, a survival sense that told them when death lurked nearby. And right now, every part of his being screamed at him to run. His mandibles twitched. "You expect me to believe this is a simple task?" he asked, his voice coming out sharper than intended. "There is something in there. Something unnatural." His compound eyes flickered toward the human, searching for any sign of deception. But Sarah only smiled, that same infuriating, confident expression humans always wore when they were about to prove something impossible. "Oh, it's natural, all right," she said, stepping closer. "It's just not your kind of natural." She tilted her head slightly. "This is the test of courage. Every new recruit on this ship takes it. It's not about strength or skill or intelligence. It's about something deeper, something only a few species in the galaxy actually understand." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "It's about will." K-Tail exhaled slowly, trying to push down the unease settling in his chest. He was an ambassador of the Exilari Empire, a representative of a species that had thrived through careful diplomacy, calculated precision, and an unyielding instinct for survival. They did not take unnecessary risks. They did not walk into the unknown without absolute certainty of survival. And yet, humans did. That was what made them different. That was what made them dangerous. His gaze drifted back to the corridor, and his claws flexed against his palms. He could feel something inside, something unseen, something that whispered at the edges of his mind. It was a test, yes, but not one of combat or strategy. It was a test of something deeper, something he had never been forced to confront before. His entire species had spent centuries mastering the art of avoidance, of careful planning, of ensuring that no situation ever spiraled beyond control. But this was pure, blind confrontation. No guarantees. No safety nets. Just fear and the choice to walk through it. Sarah stepped back, giving him space. "You can walk away if you want," she said, her voice softer now, no longer teasing but oddly understanding. "No one will blame you. But if you do, you'll never understand why we are the way we are." K-Tail's mandibles clicked together. He could feel his own pride fighting against his instincts. He had spent years studying humans, trying to understand what made them different from every other species in the galaxy. And now he was being given the chance to experience it firsthand, to feel what they felt. He took a step forward. The moment he entered the corridor, the air changed. The lights dimmed further, and the walls seemed to close in around him. He felt the weight of something watching him, pressing against his mind like a silent predator waiting for him to break. The whispers grew louder, unintelligible yet filled with meaning, words he could not understand yet somehow felt in his bones. The fear clawed at his chest, urging him to stop, to turn back. But he didn't. He forced himself forward, step by agonizing step. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to stop, to flee to the safety of the known. But he clenched his fists and kept going, because that was what humans did. They walked toward fear, not away from it. They faced what should be impossible and made it possible. The whispers grew into a deafening roar, the pressure in his skull building to a point where he thought it might crush him. His breath came in sharp gasps. His vision blurred. But just when he thought he would collapse, just when his body threatened to betray him, he reached the end. The corridor opened into a brightly lit chamber, and the pressure vanished. The whispers ceased. The fear that had been suffocating him only moments ago was gone, as if it had never been there in the first place. He stood there, panting, his claws trembling, his body drenched in sweat. And then, slowly, understanding dawned. Sarah was waiting for him on the other side, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk on her face. "See?" she said, her voice filled with something K-Tail had never heard before, respect. "Now you get it." He did. It wasn't about strength. It wasn't about fearlessness. It was about something deeper. Humans didn't survive because they were the strongest or the fastest. They survived because they could face the impossible and keep walking. They stared into the abyss, into the unknown, into the things that made other species flee in terror, and they stepped forward anyway. For the first time in his life, K-Tail truly understood why the galaxy feared humanity. Not because of their weapons, their technology, or their aggression, but because they never stopped moving forward, no matter what stood in their way. And now, standing on the other side of the corridor, heart still pounding, K-Tail realized something else. Neither would he. The Galactic Council had always considered Earth a mystery, a planet filled with contradictions. On one hand, humans were diplomatic, eager to form alliances and share knowledge. On the other, they were warriors, their history soaked in blood, their survival built on wars that should have destroyed them. No species had ever risen from such chaos and become a spacefaring civilization so quickly. To the Council, humanity's past was dangerous, a history filled with brutality, resilience, and an unnatural ability to adapt. And now, Ambassador Virak was beginning to understand why. He stood in the heart of the human capital, on a planet that had once been the battleground for countless wars. He had read the files, studied the history, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality. The air was thick with the scent of rain, the towering buildings shining under artificial lights, their designs blending elegance with practicality. But beneath the surface, beneath the modern marvels and diplomatic niceties, there was something old, something that had never truly disappeared. He could feel it in the way humans walked, in the way their eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, as if expecting danger even in the safest of places. His escort, Captain Elena Carter, walked beside him, her posture relaxed but her presence commanding. "You seem uneasy, Ambassador," she said, her tone polite but observant. "Not what you expected?" Virak hesitated. He had visited countless worlds, met beings whose very existence defied logic, but here, on Earth, he felt out of place. "I expected a world of peace," he admitted. "Your people have joined the Council. You claim to seek harmony. And yet, this place, it carries the weight of something darker." Elena smirked, but there was no humor in it. "That's because it's still here," she said simply. "You can't erase the past. You can build over it, you can try to bury it, but it never really goes away." She gestured ahead, toward a massive structure that loomed over the city, a museum, according to the human records. But Virak knew better. This was not a place of mere history. It was a warning. As they entered, the silence inside was deafening. The walls were lined with images, cities reduced to ash, battlefields littered with bodies, weapons that had once reshaped the world with a single strike. Virak had studied the wars of other species, conflicts that had reshaped entire civilizations, but none of them compared to what he saw here. Humans had fought wars not for survival, but out of greed, out of fear, out of sheer refusal to submit. And yet, despite the destruction, they had always rebuilt. Elena stopped before a massive display, a holographic projection of Earth before it had reached the stars. It showed continents marked by war, nations locked in endless struggles, a world teetering on the edge of ruin time and time again. "This is what we come from," she said quietly. "This is why the Council doesn't trust us, why they watch us so closely. Because they know what we are capable of." She turned to face him, her gaze steady. "And that scares them." Virak felt a chill run through him. He had seen humans in battle before, had watched their soldiers fight with a determination that defied all logic. He had once believed it was their technology, their tactics, that made them so dangerous. But now, standing in this museum, he understood the truth. It wasn't their weapons. It was their history. Humans had been forged in fire, tempered by conflict, shaped by a past so violent that any other species would have collapsed under the weight of it. But they hadn't. They had survived. They had thrived. And now, they stood among the stars, not as conquerors, but as equals. "You fear that the past will repeat itself," he said slowly. "That one day, all of this will return." Elena was silent for a moment before she answered. "We fear that it never really left." Virak turned back to the display, the images of war flickering before him. The Council had always viewed humanity as a paradox, both a threat and an ally, a race capable of great destruction yet striving for peace. Now he understood why. Humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons, nor their intelligence, nor even their resilience. It was their ability to remember. They carried their past with them, not as a burden, but as a lesson. And that was what made them truly dangerous. As he left the museum, stepping back into the rain-soaked streets, Virak realized something unsettling. The Council had spent years trying to understand humanity, trying to predict what they might become. But they had been asking the wrong question. The real question was not if humanity would repeat its past. It was whether the galaxy was ready when they did. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with tension so thick it felt like a physical weight pressing down on everyone present. Representatives of 100 species sat in silence, their gazes locked on the two figures standing at the center of the chamber. One was Ambassador Doran, a high-ranking diplomat of the Zarathian Empire, a species known for their tactical brilliance and calculated approach to interstellar politics. The other was Admiral Ethan Cole, a human, a member of the most unpredictable and controversial species to ever join the galactic community. Today, the fate of the human-Zarathian alliance was to be decided, and everyone in the room knew that whatever happened next would change the balance of power forever. Doran's voice was calm but firm as he addressed the assembly. The Zarathian Empire has always valued stability and order. We do not make alliances lightly, nor do we engage in wars without purpose. Yet, in recent years, our partnership with humanity has brought complications. The humans are reckless, impulsive. They do not follow tradition. They do not adhere to the careful diplomacy that has kept this galaxy at peace for centuries. And now, because of them, we stand at the brink of war with the Draven Dominion. His gaze flickered to Admiral Cole. "Tell me, Admiral, do you deny that it was human interference that led to this crisis?" Admiral Cole did not flinch. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp, taking in every detail of the room, every shift in expression. He had stood in battles where entire fleets hung on the edge of destruction, where one wrong move meant the end. This, compared to that, was nothing. "I won't deny that humanity acted first," he said, his voice steady. "But let's not pretend the Draven Dominion was innocent. They were preparing to wipe out an entire colony. You all saw the reports. If we hadn't acted, thousands, millions would be dead. We did what had to be done." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some species nodded in agreement. Others whispered among themselves, their expressions unreadable. Doran's mandibles twitched in frustration. And that is the problem, Admiral. You act without waiting, without considering the consequences. We Zerathians have survived for centuries by being careful, by calculating every step. But humans? You throw yourselves into danger without hesitation, without guarantee of victory? That is not strategy. That is madness. Admiral Cole let out a slow breath. You're right, he admitted, and a ripple of surprise ran through the chamber. We don't always wait. We don't always calculate every possibility before acting. Because sometimes, waiting means innocent people die, and we won't stand by and let that happen. His gaze swept across the room, addressing not just Doran, but the entire council. You call it recklessness. We call it courage. We call it doing what's right, even when it's hard. Silence filled the hall. The other species who had once viewed humans as mere newcomers were now seeing something else, something far more dangerous. Doran's expression darkened. And that is why the Zerathian Empire must. Admiral Cole's fingers tightened into a fist, but his face remained calm. He had expected this. He had known this would be the argument. He could see it in the eyes of the other species' hesitation, doubt, fear. They admired humanity, respected them even, but they did not understand them. So he did something no one expected. He laughed. A low chuckle at first, then a full, genuine laugh that echoed through the chamber. Doran stiffened, and the other delegates exchanged uneasy glances. You still don't get it, Cole said, shaking his head. You think we're here to lead? You think we want to control the fate of this galaxy? He took a step closer to Doran, meeting his gaze. We didn't come here to rule. We came here to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. We came here to make sure that no matter how powerful an empire is, no matter how much influence a species has, no one gets to decide who lives and who dies unchecked. His voice dropped lower, carrying the weight of countless battles, countless sacrifices. Because the moment we start waiting to act, the moment we start playing politics while people suffer, we become no better than the monsters we fight. The chamber was dead silent. Even Doran, so sure of his argument before, hesitated. He wanted to refute the human, to call his words emotional nonsense. But deep inside, he knew there was truth in them. The Zerathians had survived by avoiding unnecessary risks, by ensuring they never fought a battle they could not win. But humans? They fought not because they knew they would win, but because it was the right thing to do. Doran exhaled slowly. You are asking us to trust that your methods will not lead us to ruin. Admiral Cole nodded. I'm asking you to trust that we'll always stand when it matters. That we won't back down when lives are at stake. That when the time comes, we'll be there not because it's profitable, not because it's politically beneficial, but because it's the right thing to do. The council remained silent for several long moments, the weight of the decision pressing down on them all. Then, slowly, Doran turned to the assembly. The Zerathian Empire will honor its alliance with humanity. A murmur of approval spread through the hall. The alliance, once on the verge of collapse, had been saved. But more than that, a new understanding had been forged not just between humans and Zerathians, but between humanity and the entire galaxy. Because for the first time, they all saw why humans were different. They weren't the strongest, the smartest, or the most advanced. But when the darkness came, when the impossible choices had to be made, they were the ones who would never turn away.